When it comes to free agency, how much do you defer a lot to Trent on this kind of things because it's not a process you've been through before? And as a follow-up, do you actually rank these guys, put a grade on them the same way you would draft prospects?
Well, Gene, the one thing that I've been able to do over the certainly last 15 years is have a front seat view of the way professional organizations go about their business with GMs, coaches. We've had some really, really good players over the years. And so all 32 teams, I was talking to someone early in the process of becoming a coach here, is that, just the way people do your business, you have great respect for the ones that dive deep. It's not recruiting, and I understand the difference, but free agency to me is a labor-intensive proposition. That means that the hardest working, the deepest digging staffs, a lot like recruiting, they get the best players. And so to answer your question, I will defer quite a bit to Trent, and he's hired an excellent staff. But our coaches have done a deep dive into every one of these. They ultimately, you're going to hear the term power of the unit. I've used that at Florida and also Ohio State. Ultimately, the tight end coach is responsible for who walks in that room. And he's going to utilize every resource, and that's called scouts, that's called scouting directors, that's called a general manager, it's called a head coach and coordinator. And they're going to do a deep dive. It's also called Zoom calls and finding out as much as he can about that person walking in his unit room. So that's the way we go about our business. Ultimately, it's a position coach is going to have a heavy hand on who comes in there, yet Trent and his staff obviously are the number one resource we use.
Do you actually rank these guys? In other words, prioritize how much you're willing to spend on a certain player, and then if the price tag gets too high, do you just decide to move on? How does that work?
Yes, so great question. We did an end of season report, and that was every coach did a deep, along with myself, into our current roster. And then from our current roster, we did about a 3-week evaluation of what's available. The coordinator, along with his staff, put together the top 10 needs in order to be a functioning offense in the NFL. And then Trent, myself, and his staff are now putting together, and that's where the term that Trent likes to use, the value. I don't think we're in position just because we have a lot of holes. We're 1 in 15. There are some quality players here, but there's also a lot of holes. So that's where Trent, we're going to rely on his experience and his other guys on his staff on how much it costs. So answer your question, yes, there will be some guys we don't feel it's the right thing to go on because it will just eliminate other opportunities for other players.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gene. We're going to go to Hayes Carlin with 1010XL.
Hey, Urban, are you guys planning on using the franchise tag on Cam Robinson? And if so, can you explain why that decision is the one that you went with, please?
We are heading in that direction. George Warhoff feels very strong about his future and the development. We realized that he has a great future. His ceiling is very high. I've studied him very much. I spent some time with him. We feel that the way this free agency is moving is that left tackle position, as always, but even more now this year, from hearing from the guys that have been in the NFL, this is a tough year for that left tackle position. And we feel just what's out there, and with coaching, culture, and development, Cam has a lot of talent.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hayes. Let's go to Mark Long with the Associated Press.
Hi, Urban. Just curious, going into free agency, what do you, now that you've had all this time to evaluate your team, what do you see as your strengths and weaknesses heading into this key part of development?
You always start at the quarterback position. Obviously, Gardner was a guy that had some success early here. I've spent a little bit of time with him, not a lot of time with him, but you always start at the quarterback position. And we have the number 1 pick. There's a lot of speculation out there that, that will be the first pick. So the number 1 is just making sure we have exactly the quarterback room exactly the way we want it. From there, you look at a defense that really struggled in a lot of areas. And I always believe you build your team around the defensive line, and then you move backwards. And so that's what we're going to do. So our defensive line, we feel good about a few of our players are pretty good. I just don't want to go into names right now. I don't think that's fair to the players, but defensive line will be solidified first, and then we move to the back of the defense. And our defensive secondary needs to be revamped at a few spots. Offensively, I think we have some really good receivers. We're not done with that room, however. I just think if you've covered our teams over the years, the need for speed, the big play opportunity was not with the Jaguars last year, and we're searching for the big play hit at the receiver position. Running back James, we feel pretty good about him. He had a good year, so we want to build a room with him being an integral part of it. The tight end room, that's a room that's going to have to be rebuilt in some ways. So, and the offense line, especially the interior of the line, I feel really good about them. Norwell, Linder, and AJ, those guys are good. And our right tackle, I feel like his future's ahead of them too. So the offensive line, if we can they should be better than a year. The expectation is the offensive line will be much better next year.
All right, thanks, Mark. Let's go to Mia O'Brien and then John Reed.
Excuse me, I'm at the players right now, so excuse my current look. Hey, Coach Urban, just wondering, as far as that offensive line goes, building upon the decision to use the franchise tag on Cam, what is your assessment of that offensive line in terms of veterans and maybe where either you keep everyone you have or where maybe you can add pieces?
We have not finalized that. I made a comment a couple of weeks ago that I think the offensive line, when you watch the Jaguars play, especially the interior of the line, the two tackles are going to get better. They're young players. That's an area that has got to play better than it did a year ago, but we all know they can. And another year together. So the offensive line, we expect them to play better, but we think there's some pretty good pieces in place.
And I know there's been a lot of speculation about Andrew Norwell. His name has been in the news. You obviously coached him previously. What is your relationship with him and what is his status moving forward?
He's one of my favorite players I've ever coached, and he's a guy that was an underdog when we got there to Ohio State, became, the offensive line at Ohio State was one of the worst in the Big Ten and became the best in the Big Ten. He was a big part of it. I was not surprised to see him get a high free agency contract because he's a grinder, he's a worker, he's a team guy, he's a locker room guy. So I see him being part of the Jaguars, and I want him to be a part of the Jaguars. He's for me personally, I love the guy. Because I know him better than most.
Awesome. Thanks, Urban. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mia. Let's go to John Reed with the Times-Union. John, go ahead. All right, we'll come back to you. Let's go to Demetrius Harvey.
Hey, Coach, you talked a little bit about the need to address the secondary this year. What is sort of your evaluation on that secondary, and sort of what have the coaches told you about C.J. Henderson, seeing that they coached him last year?
I spent some time with C.J. My gosh, is he talented? I know Dan Mullen very well, who coached him in college. He's an integral part of this. Obviously you spend a high draft pick on him, and a wonderful young man that dealt with some injury situations and missed some games near the end of the season. But he did have labrum surgery, by the way, and everything came out fine. He's actually in here rehabbing today, so we're counting on him. The other spots we're still evaluating. What you have and then what's available, and that's a big part of where we're at right now.
Can you talk a little bit more about the sports facility or sports complex you guys are looking to build, and how much of a priority is that, and sort of what would that do for your future here?
Well, I think if you look at our history, that I just have a very firm belief about, believing that there's greatness in everyone and pushing people to find that greatness, but then also giving them everything possible. That when I look at Jacksonville, a big reason why I took this job, I just believe because I love the city of Jacksonville, I love the state of Florida, the fact that there's the tax issue, which, when you're in college, you didn't have to, it was recruiting. I never talked about tax issues with recruits, but that's reality when you start talking about professional football. It's a place you can live very comfortably. 12 months a year and raise a family here. So I refuse to believe that this cannot become a destination spot for free agent or for a great player. And we need to make sure that everything's in place to have that player want to be here. And I'm not just talking about from August to December or January. I just, once again, that maybe it's a dream, but that's a dream that I'm gonna hold on to, that I just someday see our players living here, training, getting the best training possible, and enjoying a life in Jacksonville, Florida.
Thank you.
Thanks, Demetrius. John, are you there? We'll try you one more time. Unfortunately, we can't hear you, so we'll go to Cole Pepper with WJXT.
All right. Hi, Urban. You have the most salary cap room of any team in the NFL heading into free agency. Do you anticipate spending most of it, or have you plotted out a plan over the next several years in terms of where that salary cap space will be spent?
I'm going to rely on Trent, and obviously Shad is going to be very involved in that. My job is try to put the best team together and then learn. That's something that, to act like I'm an expert in that, I'm certainly not. I know talent, I know teams, I know chemistry. I'm going to really rely on people who've lived in that world. And so, to answer your question, I don't know that.
And as a follow-up, you talked about trying to add chemistry and bring in guys who will fit the chemistry. How do you judge that in terms of this year of free agency, particularly with some of the restrictions with the pandemic still going on?
We've had many meetings, and it's just called creative ways of gathering information. I've had great recruiters that I never asked them. I'd say, tell me about so-and-so. Well, I talked to his uncle. I've talked to the assistant strength coach. I've talked to the equipment people. I've talked to his girlfriend. I've done a deep dive. Then I've had other assistant coaches that they won't call me back. Those are usually very poor recruiters. And I see free agency the same way, that these coaches are once again ultimately responsible for who walks in that room. And that means be creative. Unfortunately, you can't fly guys in like the old days, and I can't wait for that to come back. So you're talking about organizational decisions made by people that there's chances we have not spent much time with them. And that, to be honest with you, that I don't feel great about that. I feel great about the coaches that have done their work behind the scenes, digging up, or else has had previous experience with them, coaching them in the room. We're probably going to lean on more in that scenario. So if our coaches I've hired a bunch of guys from NFL that have NFL experience, that if they've had them, I feel much better about someone we just don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cole. Let's go to Andy Staples.
You mentioned, Coach, that this is not recruiting, but the talent evaluation portion of it, how similar is that to what you did in college, and how much more fine-tuned does it have to be when we're talking about so many fewer spots available?
Well, this is my first month doing it, and I find it to be very similar. When I hear people say, well, recruiting, do you just pick 5 stars and go? That's not true at all. The Mike Thomas to Sam Hubbards to, Jeffrey Dent. I'm looking at Andy from Florida, the players that maybe weren't the high name guys. That's great evaluation. I told this story to our staff many times about Eric Weddle when I was at Utah. The best evaluator maybe I've ever been around is Kyle Whittingham, because he had a certain way of going in and evaluate talent, and he rarely missed. So watching the video is a big part of it, but doing a deep dive, and we always talk about what's the floor, what's the ceiling. Obviously, we're looking for players with high ceilings coming out of college.
And how much does having Charlie, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and people and trust in terms of they know what you're looking for in a player upstairs, and then you've got the other guys with the scheme fit part of it, where you're still kind of developing what the scheme's going to look like. Well,
there's 2 guys, Andy, we hired. Them both. There's Ryan Stamper, is a director of assessment, and I don't know if that position exists in the NFL. When I brought it up, and once again, I've been working on this for a long time, I just kept thinking about, who do I trust? Who do I know? Who do I know players, and who knows me, what I would expect to have in that locker room? And there's none better than Ryan Stamper. So Ryan Stamper will be the person that on draft day, he's going to have a voice in that draft room. As far as the we call it the mindset. What is the mindset of the player, and does it fit the mindset that we're looking for to be a Jaguar? And that's the competitive spirit, toughness, intelligence, leadership, and adaptability. Do they have those qualities? And that's Ryan's responsibility, to work with our assistant coach and scouts to find that out. So I think it's very similar. This is 1 month on the job. The great recruiters, I imagine, acquire great people in free agency.
Thank you, Andy. All right, let's go to Jordan DeLugo and then Mike Duraco.
Hey, Coach, have you had the chance to talk to Cam Robinson about being franchise tagged and confirm that he will play under the tag in 2021?
I've spoke to him several times. I have not had that direct conversation with him. I imagine that'll take place at some point today.
Okay. And is there any chance that he gets a new contract during this offseason?
Oh, I think so. Sure. That's our intent is to have Cam Robinson play for the Jaguars for a while.
Okay. Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Jordan. Let's go to Mike Duraco.
Urban, have you hired anybody to be the director of sports performance to replace Chris Doyle yet, or where are you in that process?
Yeah, we're pretty close to finalizing our evaluation. Anthony Schlegel, and we hired 3 new coaches in the strength room. Brendan Ireland, forgetting the names here. Adam Potts, Brendan Ireland, and Sed are working directly, and they've done a great job. We hired a new trainer in Ferguson, Jeff Ferguson, and he's been outstanding. So we're still in the evaluation phase, but I feel pretty good about where we're at. I think, Mike, you know the importance that we put on the sports performance team, and I'm hoping it will be the best or as good as anyone in the NFL, and I feel great with where we're at right now. Our nutritionists have been great. We kept the same nutrition staff. Our equipment staff was great. Sports psychology trainers and everybody, that all falls under the umbrella of sports performance. And the analytics piece has been fantastic so far.
Not to beat a dead horse here, but what kind of changed in that 24-hour period from the time, you announced Chris Doyle and were pretty staunch defender and the following night when he did resign? Was Shad involved in that? What changed in that time frame?
Well, I saw the impact of the decision and the distraction it caused, and the most important part of our organization is and always will be our players. And I just, we all felt, and when I say both, Trent, myself, and then Chris Doyle felt it was best that this team didn't need to. Everything's going too well. We hired an excellent staff. We don't need a distraction and move forward. It was the best interest of all.
And I saw that you spoke about new facilities here. Can you kind of give us a little bit of idea what when you're talking about new facility, you're talking about training center, offices, on-site, off-site? What are your thoughts there?
Well, we call it the culture of excellence, and we expect everything to be the best of the best. And right now, it's not here at Jacksonville. There's a lot of great things that are. There's certain areas that are not. So my job, and I push really hard, is especially when you're talking about health and safety of players, I expect it to be the very best. So we're pushing hard, and our owner, Shad, has been fantastic to listen and learn about the way we expect, and he expects the best of the best. So we're right in the middle of that conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, D-Rock. Let's go to John Shipley.
Hey, Urban. I know there are a few young players on the defensive line and on the edge interior, but what is your real assessment of the work you guys have to do there moving forward?
We have a lot of work to do, but there's some great pieces. Josh Allen my gosh. You're talking about, his first year was a little better than last year, but as far as a person, as far as I met his family, my gosh, I want that guy around here as long as we can have him. Devon Hawkins is another guy that's really, I coached him at Ohio State. Our coaches, Tosh Lupoy and Joe, feel he has a very strong future. The other guys, those are just 2 names that I know very well. The other guys I don't know that well yet. I'm getting to know them. But there's one commonality of great teams. They have great defense lines. That you can't avoid that. There's ways to hide other things, but you cannot hide it. You got to have a strong defense line. And we're committed to do that here.
Thanks.
All right, let's go to Brent Martineau.
Hey there, Urban. Hopefully you can hear me okay. If I go back to Trevor Lawrence's pro day, is there something you learned from that hour and a half that maybe you didn't know already that you took back home to Jacksonville with you?
It couldn't have gone better. I think I made the comment, we had high expectations going into it, like really high. I've seen him throw before. I really wanted Darrell Bevel and Brian Schottenheimer to witness it. They have never, watching a guy throw, especially throw on videotape, that's not the same. And, and I made the comment about you want to hear it leave his hand, listen to it leave, go by you. I mean, that's, to me, I don't know how you evaluate a quarterback without doing that. So I thought he did great. We've had a couple Zoom calls with him, and he's been great. And we like where we're at with him.
If I could follow up just real quick, are you guys allowed to, if you wanted to get to this point, to put a playbook in his hands even before the draft? Is that something you'd be allowed to do or interested in doing?
Yeah, we're doing that with several positions and more than one quarterback. You are allowed to do that. In the old days, you did that. I sat in them when I was a coach in college. You sit in those meetings and you learn a lot. You learn a lot about the team that's doing the evaluation, how thorough they are, and then you obviously learn a lot about the players. So yes, we have done that, and you are allowed to do that, and not just the quarterback position. We're going to do that with other positions. That's essential to find out first of all, what's your starting point of the football acumen, and then, how are they at learning? And there's only one way.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brent. Let's go to Tony Wiggins. Tony, you there? All right. Well, John Reed, do you want to give it one more shot while you're here? Otherwise, we'll wrap this up. All right. Looks like that's all. Thank you so much for your time, Coach. I really appreciate it.
See you, Mark. See you guys.